Hello, Yordles and Yahoos. My name is Teemo, and Riot Games, a company which is constitutionally unable to just fucking chill for 2 minutes, had a live stream today where they revealed a whole bunch of the new stuff that's going to be coming to League of Legends and League of Legends adjacent products in the 2021 season. Among these are a preview of the Mundo rework, which looks kind of bad, a proper full reveal of the Ruined King and his lore, which looks really freaking good, and a new expansion for Legends of Runeterra, which we're going to Shurima, which I'm quite excited about. Aphelios is coming to Legends of Runeterra, which I dread with every fiber of my being. And basically, they just revealed a whole million reminders that I should probably get my ass together and finish up the Dan Seraphine video so I can do the Rel video, so I can do a video about the Ruined King and a video about Mundo, because, oh boy. Just give me a month, Riot. Just a month, that's all I ask. Anyway, among the many things they revealed were also a couple of animated shorts. The first one was Ruination, which is sort of the tone setter for the season, as it were. A big, fancy animated short progressing the lore of League of Legends a bit, introducing the Ruined King and the stuff that he's capable of and the kinds of things that he does. And then there's this, Do Not Mess With Yordles, which is an animated short about the Yordles who are being messed with. Specifically, they're being messed with by Graves, and well, not so much Twisted Fate. He's sort of on the sidelines just watching Graves get his ass handed to him by Yordles. And I figured, okay, if I'm gonna do anything, let's start with this thing. First of all, because it's a little bit lighter than the whole Ruination short, which is like, oh boy, that's a lot. And also because it has a lot of really good, appealing character animation that I think it would be fun to talk about. So let's start at the beginning with Teemo getting exactly what he deserves. Yeah, suffer, you little rat! Suffer! Teemo went to prison, which is all that he deserves. But it's also part of the storytelling of this animated short, which is working very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. Because we open with this shot of Teemo is getting thrown in jail. He's clearly very unhappy to be there. It's not a happy situation for him, but it's a happy situation for us watching him. And then we get this shot right here in his journal, where we're looking at, oh, this is a weird twisted plant thing with these spirally stuff in it. Well, I wonder what that place could be, as we cut immediately to that place, what we just saw in the journal, which establishes visually, like, imagine you know nothing about League of Legends, or Runeterra, or Teemo, or the Yordles, or anything. Seeing the thing that he drew in his journal, and then immediately cutting to the thing that he drew in his journal, you get an establishment of, okay, he's connected to this somehow. Like, somehow he's connected to what's going on here. And then we get the dialogue from the characters, which are talking about, Teemo has been captured, he's in Bilgewater, we need to go and save him. And so you can instantly intuit, okay, that guy is friends with these guys, and they're gonna go save him, because he's in Bilgewater, wherever the hell that is, doesn't matter. And this tree thing here is gonna be key to making that happen somehow. And then we get a bit of a character introduction. We get an introduction to Tristana and Corki, and we immediately get their relationship established as well, which is part of the efficiency of the storytelling here. If you take a look at their body language, and in fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to enable you to do that, which I can because I downloaded this video file in 4K because I am a smart boy, and it's not going to look too terribly blurred when I blow it up to triple size. Take a look at their body language relative to each other, and without knowing anything else about the characters, tell me what kind of relationship they have to each other. Right? We just get, like, it's just like a couple of seconds, really, but when you look at the way that these characters act towards each other, you can instantly tell what the dynamic is between them. With Tristana, she's standing very sort of firm, planted, calm. She doesn't make a lot of movement during this scene. Corki, on the other hand, he's all popcorn. He starts from here, then he does this little pop. Like, you can see he pops his arm forward, leans forward. He's got the arm down. He's like, he's clearly demanding something. He's making some kind of an argument, and Tristana is quite literally rolling her eyes at him, right? And then he's like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Oh yes, here's my new demand. Please. You can see that he's pleading with her, that he's arguing something with her, and Tristana is like, oh my god, please stop talking. So while you don't, even again, if you don't know anything specific about the Yordles or how Bandle City works or anything about who these characters are, you get a sense of the relationship that they have to each other, which again is part of the storytelling here. You need to know that how Tristana thinks of Corki, because that's going to explain her decision to try and get Corki to go away so she can run out and try and save Teemo on her own. And she's going to repeat that story again with Lulu as she enters into the scene, because the dynamic here is that Tristana is the straight man of the comedy triple act. which is where, like, Corky and Lulu are the comedic sidekick characters who kind of who mess things up and who aren't really taking things super seriously. And Tristana is sort of the straight man who's trying to corral them, like trying to just avoid everything going to hell in a handbasket because these two silly idiots run along and do their silly stuff while I'm trying to be a serious soldier person, right? You get that sense from the body language that, like, with Corky, it's a thing of Tristana, like, she's like, oh god, really, you? She's frustrated by him because he's always so hyper enthusiastic about, I shall go and fight the enemy and shoot them with my gunship, blah blah. And then with Lulu, it's much less of an eye-rolling thing, and it's more of a, ooh, oh god, okay, I need to come up with a good explanation as for why she shouldn't go on this expedition. She might get hurt. Like, this is much more concern, right? This is much more like, I need to distract her. I need to get her out of the way. What can I do? This rock! And then before she has time to object to it, she's like, toodaloo, and run away before Lulu has a chance to, like, to say anything about it. So there's a difference in the relationship that Tristana has to these two characters. You can see that with Lulu, it's much more, like, it's much more indulgent and protective. It's much more of a big sister, little sister kind of thing. Whereas with Corky, it's much more about, like, Corky's her embarrassing dad kind of thing that's going on there. Which is the little things that come through just in the ways that the body language is used to communicate the characters. Anyway, another important thing that happens in terms of the storytelling here is that as Corky pops into his ridiculous flying machine, we see this happen. He flies into one of these holes and disappears, right? So instantly you understand, oh, okay, that's a portal. There's a magic portal thing. He flies into that and he goes somewhere else. Okay, cool. Got it. We understand. And that sets up the moment later as Tristana runs away from Lulu and jumps into yet another portal. So you get the sense, okay, so these portals probably go to different places, which means that now Corky is in one place, God knows where, and Tristana is in Rat Town and Bilgewater. And then this happens. This is so cool. I love this so much. Okay, so Yordle portals are something we've known about in the lore of League of Legends for a while. That they are these, like, sort of quasi-random, completely insensible things that don't, like, they sometimes they appear as floating rock circles in the sky. Sometimes it's like a random plant on the side of the road that's for some reason a Yordle portal. Like, literally anything can be a Yordle portal and a portal into Bilgewater. And here we get to see, like, how that works out in reality, because Bandle City is not a space that is bound by the laws of physics. It's not bound by the laws of linear time, the same way that the physical reality of Runeterra is. It's a realm of magic where, like, sometimes you can spend 10 minutes in a place and it'll take 100 years. Sometimes you can spend 100 years and it'll take 10 minutes. Sometimes you can be walking in a place where gravity is different depending on which direction you're facing. Like, it's a place that works in complete magical realism logic, or unlogic as the case may be. And here we get to see the interaction between a Bandle City realm and something like Bilgewater, where we go from this sort of drab-looking dock to literally, like, it's basically like bursting, like a sit almost. And it becomes this thing of, like, you can see the distortion, especially on the anchor here. Like, the anchor is distorted out so that it looks almost like a leaf, right? Like, this begins to look almost more like a weird kind of plant or flower thing, and flowers begin to grow, and, like, leaves and plants and vines begin to burst into existence all around Bilgewater, and then zhup, as quickly as that happens, you can see it vanishes again. So this is the realm of Bandle City. This is the magical dimension of Bandle City intersecting with Bilgewater and twisting it into a new shape that makes sense much more for Bandle City. I just think it's a really cool visual effect. Like, you can see the whole space distort. Like, you can see the anchor already beginning to sort of twist into a different shape, and then and everything sort of bursts open like a seed pod, or, well, maybe almost like a beehive where the honey is sort of spilling out. And we get Tristana, like, flying out with this trail of, like, golden, I don't know, teleportation goop, whatever the heck it is. Which, unless I'm much mistaken, might be hand-animated. Oh yeah, it is. So here, you can tell that little tendril right there isn't moving, while Tristana and the rest of the scene is. Then it moves, then it doesn't move, then it moves, then it doesn't move. So these tendrils of light here, like, the lighting and glow effect here is added digitally, but this seems to be hand-animated stuff, which is lovely. And there's some really cool effects on, like, the ways that the plants grow. Actually, let's zoom into that a little bit more. I want to see it up close. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at how cool that looks. That's excellent. Here you can see the moments of transformation that happen. Brilliant. And like the little plants like starting to bloom, and then it just gets sucked back in. One moment it's there, the next moment, poof, all gone. Which is such a cool way to do these magical effects. Anyway, character animation. Theoretically, the thing that I talk most about. So Tristana shoots out here, and now take a look at what happens to her body. So we get this bit of coyote time. Like, coyote time is, you know how the coyote in Roadrunner cartoons, he'll run out over a cliff, and then he'll just run and run and run, and then eventually he realizes, oh no, I have run out over a cliff. And then gravity kicks in and he falls down. But until then, he's sort of in this state of suspension where gravity doesn't quite affect him. That's something that's used all over character animation. Even in the most, like, serious, realistic kinds of animation, you use a little bit of coyote time here and there just to manipulate the exact timing and movement of how a character is affected by gravity and when they fall down. So here with Tristana, for example, we get just a little bit of coyote time as she does this flip in the air, right? Like, because here she's actually at the apex of her jump, like here. And gravity should be affecting her already, but there's just this little moment of, like, we're just extending this a little bit further than it probably should go, so that we get time to process that she leaps into the air, does a flip, and then we get down. And I wish they wouldn't use motion blur. Like, I wish these productions would stop applying motion blur to the characters, because it makes... I can't see what she's doing. I want to see the model deform. But the motion blur is probably also being used to cover that up, because look at how she stretches. Tristana becomes a stretchy girl here as she comes down for the landing, which is a bit of squash and stretch that's used to accentuate the speed of her motion. And you can kind of see it when you pay attention. How she kind of goes from moving in this direction pretty much, and then flip, woof, and then down. Right? And it's a really nice and pleasing motion, but it's not realistic in the least. Like, that's not at all how gravity would work, but it's how gravity works when we need it to for the purposes of this. And her model looks so good. Like, they really made some nice Yordle models for the character. Look at her big fluffy ears. They're so big. I want to pet them. And then we get a comedy beat. Whereas, like, Tristana's like, okay, we need to be stealthy. We need to be careful. We need to find where Teemo is, and we need to not be spotted by the humans. Oh. And I do love the surprise in her eyes when, like, she spots it, and then she's like, oh. And it's like, oh my god, this is a really cool gun! And it's like, oh, right, this is a gun. It's a lovely, like, it's all done pretty much just by the facial expression of the character, right? Like, she starts out, like, sort of, like, serious and like, okay, I need to find my friend. It's like, oh, what's this thing? Oh my god, that's one of the... Yeah, thank you very much, Motorcycle Man, going by outside. I hope you didn't hear that. Oh my god, that's a really cool weapon. Oh, I love this thing. Look at that. I want to pet it. Can I use it? Can I hold it? Can I pull the trigger? What does it do when you pull the trigger? Oh, right. It blows things to pieces. Ooh. And all of that, you just get that from the expressiveness of the character. Like, you can kind of just see it in her face, basically. But this also gets at, by the way, something else about the character animation, which is that Yordles are actually kind of difficult to animate. Well, it depends on how much you practice it, like anything else, but there's a big difference between animating a character who has the proportions of a Yordle versus animating a character who has the proportions of, like, a relatively ordinary human. Because Yordles have giant heads, which means they have a huge weight that sits basically on top of their character model and screws around with their center of gravity. Which means if you want to animate the character believably, you have to be conscious and careful of that, and know exactly how to make the character move in a way that feels believable, like that feels physical, so they don't look like they're a big, stiff, unwieldy doll. But you have to be careful not to let their center of gravity look like, hang on, this character couldn't possibly be posturing like that. They'd fall over immediately. And that adds some extra challenges because they have, like, such short legs, they have such small bodies, they have such, like, tiny hands, that the way you do character animation on them kind of has to change correspondingly. So, Corky starts from this position, right? Like, straight up and down. He's almost sort of standing to attention a little bit. And then he does that. Now, if you were to look at his body, where do you think his center of gravity is? For a person to be standing in a stable position on the ground, you need your center of gravity to be supported. This is why you can't just Michael Jackson lean forward and not fall over, because eventually your center of gravity becomes displaced enough that gravity just kind of pulls on your upper body and you fall over and fall flat on your face. This is a very basic part of posture. So when you look at Tristana here, her center of gravity is, because her head is so freaking massive, her center of gravity buoyed by the cannon is somewhere around here. So it's between her legs, which means her legs are supporting her weight. But if the center of gravity goes beyond the knees and starts hovering in air outside of where the legs can support it, that's when a character begins to look unbalanced. And the character animator here is skirting just the limits of what you can do with that really, really well by giving Corky this lovely sort of forward-leaning, cartoony pointing pose that's very dramatic, and it kind of needs to be, because, like, that's all you can see of his arm. This his little tiny glove with the pointy finger. Everything else is obscured by his giant head and his mustache and his scarf, and just like all the mass that's on top of his character model makes it really hard to animate this hand in a way that is remotely subtle. So you need this big point forward in order to communicate his body language. And I wouldn't be surprised if the character animator actually behind the character model here is stretching Corky's arm a lot longer than it's actually supposed to go, just to get it out there enough that you can actually see what the hell he's doing. Because his tiny, stubby, little short arms are, like, unable to emote in a way that would be natural to a human body, because there's so much mass to take into account. So he ends up in this very leaned forward position. Like, try and do his pose right here yourself. Like, stretch an arm out in front of you, and have your stand straight with your legs together, and then one arm back, and then point one arm in front of you, and start leaning forward, and see how far you can go before you start feeling really, really unbalanced. Because, like, I'm doing it right now, and I can barely lean like a couple of degrees forward without feeling like I'm about to fall over. So the character animator here is skirting that really well by making this pose look believable without making it look like Corky should be falling over. Just in the service of giving his animation the necessary life and power and pop, so that you can read his behavior, so that you can read his poses. Despite his tiny little hands and his stubby little legs, and so much of his body being so compressed while the head is so big. And the added problem that you have as a character animator with Corky is that you can't see his face. He doesn't have Tristana's giant expressive eyes. You don't see his mouth. You don't really see anything. You can only really move the mustache around to indicate that the mouth is moving, and, like, do some head twists like this one right here, where, like, when you can see he's thinking of what's the next thing to say, where you can see, like, he's doing this thing, which if you animated a human proportioned person doing this, like twisting their head around so far as they're thinking of something to say, that would look way excessive. Like, that would look cartoony, but on these tiny Yordle characters, it's kind of necessary, because otherwise they don't read. Like, you can't really understand their body language the same way you can on a human character. And it's the same thing for even Tristana here, who has this tiny body. So take a look at this gesture. Right? She's, like, looking at the page, she raises this hand up to her face, and then she, like, comes down and out to the side, right? Again, try to do that movement yourself. Raise a hand up to your face, and then swing it out to the side, like, as stretched out as Tristana's arm is there, and you'll find on a human person, that's a very, very, very dramatic gesture. Like, that's you're spreading your arm out really, really far, so you do that to a human, that looks like too much, but on Tristana, it's necessary to communicate a relatively subtle bit of emotion. Like, she's not, like, screaming and shouting or like, being the most dramatic she's ever been in her life, but you have to do these bigger gestures, these more dramatic movements, otherwise it just doesn't read the same way that it does on a human. And that's really impressive. Like, that's difficult work to do. It's really difficult to understand, okay, what can I do with this character rig? Like, this character design, how do I animate that so that it looks proper, so it looks believable, so that its movements and motions feel lifelike and appropriate to its emotion, without going overboard, or without doing too little and making the character feel stale and stiff? Because that's the other thing that can really happen with characters like these. Like, when you have these small, compressed characters, the animation can often feel really kind of clunky. Like, they can feel a lot like they're tiny little ball-jointed dolls that have this sort of stiff, not quite lifelike movement to them, because again, it's hard to get the movement out of them that makes them look lifelike when you're working under such constrained circumstances. And I love this. And again, I love Corky's animation is so good in this whole thing. Let's zoom in on him again, because... Yahoo! And he clicks his heels. It's such an adorable little thing. It's like, Tristana's like, weren't bogeys spotted over Piltover? Bogeys? Oh, bogeys, yes! Haha! I shall fly my plane and shoot them down! Woo! He's so excited. Like, he's such a happy little old man. It's adorable. And look at the squash and stretch being used here as he jumps into the air, right? Like, he drops his center of, like, he's going, oh, bogeys, I shall shoot them down. So he drops his center of gravity, which mostly means he drops his head, right? Like, it's just mostly the head. You can see the knees bent a little bit, but because there's so little knee to bend, you kind of don't really, like, he bends down and then pops into the air like this. And you can really see, they're using the mustache really well here as well, by the way. You can really see how he's getting stretched out. His character model gets stretched a lot, and then it pops back into shape. And then he clicks his heels, and then you can see how gravity begins to affect his lower body before the head. Like, the head kind of stays in the air, just, again, coyote time being used here, as the lower body begins to stretch and kind of pulls the rest of him along with it, and then he lands, and he uses that as a spring in his step to, like, run over to his little gunship. And it's like the mustache here is being used so well because you can see the gravity pulls on the mustache, right? So the top of the mustache moves with his head, but the bottom of it kind of almost sticks in place and moves up like a spring. And it's gorgeous. It's such a lovely little character animation. It makes him so adorable. Just instantly, he's so cute. I really love it. Like, just the Yordle animation in this thing. And that's the tragedy of animation, is always that when it's done really well, it tends to be invisible. Like, when you animate a character like this Yordle really, really well, they just look like they're moving naturally, right? It just looks like, oh yeah, this is a character who is moving. It looks like the same as any other character animation, essentially. But there is an added challenge. There's a lot of added difficulty in making these characters look expressive without making them look stiff or plastic. And Lulu is a great example of that as well. Like, you can see her enthusiasm, right? Like, you can just see it radiating all over her face, like the way she's running with her staff forward, and she's excited to go on an adventure with Big Sister Tristana. I can help! Like, you can see the enthusiasm, like the way she goes from this pose down and then springs back up again. Whee! Like, you can see she's like, I can help, please let me come with you, yay! Like, it's adorable, it's so cute! And again, it's so hard to do well. She's so cute, like, she's just so adorable, and you understand immediately that she's like, she doesn't mean any trouble, she's trying to help, she's trying to be good, she's trying to be helpful, and Tristana is like, ooh, I need to get her out of the way. But it's not that same mood as it is with Corky. It's the thing of like, okay, let's play along. Like, yes, recruit Lulu. It's very important that you, guard is right. Okay, bye. And it's just like, it's very good. And I do like the standing up straight animation they have for Tristana. Like, see how the animator is working around the trouble with the head. Like this giant mass. So as she's moving forward here, we have this head basically hovering in space, like way ahead of her spine, to the point where it looks like she should probably be falling down. And then, in order to get her to stand up straight, you get this curve, described like this, where the head comes in, moves around, and she sort of lifts it up and then moves her body underneath it in order to get the center of gravity where it needs to go. And you get this lovely sort of stand up straight, stand at attention, military bearing kind of thing. And very subtle little thing, Tristana is taller than Lulu. She's a good deal taller, which again adds to this sense of, okay, this is big sister, this is little sister, and big sister needs little sister to not get in trouble right now because she's got serious work to do, and little sister always gets in trouble, and we don't want to deal with that right now. Just in the height difference between the two of them. And the construction of their faces as well. Like, this is something I really like about these character models. Look at the shape and the volume on these little character faces. Again, there's so much work going on making the faces look good in motion, so that they don't look like they're plastic, so that they don't look like they're stale. They have this physicality to them That's really, really nice. And you can see the artist working with that as well. Like as Tristana is looking around, they're not just using the eyes. You can see she does this whole giant head rotation, basically. Which, again, if you had a human face there, having them, like, literally rotate their head 45 degrees while they're just looking for something in the environment would probably be a bit much. You can probably just move their head a little bit and move their eyes to express it. But because the head is so giant, because it's this big, voluminous thing that needs to be worked around, you can see them doing that in a way that feels natural to who these characters are. And it's just the expressiveness on Tristana's face as she finds the thing she's looking for, right? It's really good. Like, it's just really good. Like, you can see the character's mood changing on their face, right? And there's some really good work being done with lighting here as well. Look at the edge lighting we've got in Tristana's nose here, right? Because Tristana's face has this very sort of uniform bluish shade to it. So the light here is doing a great job of highlighting the volume of the face. You can see that on Lulu as well. You can see the volume of like her lower lip into her chin has this little edge light. Why am I pointing at it like that? We can just zoom in. There's this little edge light that goes down here that gives her like these really super round, cute, adorable features, and this edge light around the nose that gives shape to that part of their face so that their faces don't look flat. Because that's the other thing, is like a lot of chibi characters, by necessity, tend to be very flat. Like their faces tend to be very flat, because otherwise you have to deal with an actual nose ridge and like actual eyeball cavities and actual like lips that pout forward and stuff. And that can actually be really difficult to work around. So what the artists and animators have done here is that they've just like, okay, so let's use the lighting. Let's use the lighting to highlight the shapes of the face, to make the faces come alive as being really round and bubbly and lovely. And it's really good. I really like it. Anyway, we've, God, I went backwards in time there. We were actually moving forward with the story a little bit. But first, let's look at Lulu again. She's so cute. Look at that. And again, look how much she has to do with her arm. Like, in order to do this little stomp with the staff, again, for a human character, you'd probably just have them go like, doosh, doosh, like with a bent arm at the elbow and then pounding the staff into the ground a couple of times. Lulu has to, with all her arm completely stretched out in front, like, just completely stretched out, she has to go whoosh, whoosh, down, down. Which again is such a much more dramatic gesture for anyone human-sized, and I'll harp on this till the day the cows come home, because it's important to understand that like the animators are constantly making decisions about how do I use this character's physicality properly to show their emotional state, their behavior. And again, just the expressiveness of these faces. Like, it's helped by the fact that the eyes are super huge, but making the mouths work, that's the difficult thing. And here there's a good mix and balance being made of, like, the mouths, when they're at rest, they're relatively small, but when they're expressing, they do get, like, a lot of width and variety to them, which I think is lovely. And some lovely, again, I do believe that these spell effects and animations are hand animated. We're going to see that a little bit as well when we return to Corky, because the smoke coming out of his helicopter thing is hand animated, as well as this lovely smoke blast and fire coming out of Graves' gun. You can see that, how the entire rest of the scene is moving, while this bit isn't. And that's because the smoke is animated on 2s, which has become a bit of a meme on my channel because I say it so much, which is the frame rates. Okay, so animating on 1s, 2s, and 3s and stuff. When you're animating on 1s, you will do 24 frames to show 1 second of action. When you're animating on 2s, you'll do 12 frames to show 1 second of action. 6 frames per second, sometimes 4 and 3 frames per second, depending on the kind of animation that you're doing. This is animated on 2s, which is the same frame rate that you would typically see in a Disney movie, in a Disney animated feature, if Disney still did. If Disney still did hand animated features. Big sigh. And again, look how the mouth is being used to aid the expression on Tristana the whole time. Like, that's a good grin. Look at that. Like, with like one part of the lip kind of curled up a little bit more than the other one. And then giant, like, uh-oh. Dawning realization of shock. And you can see that in the ears as well being used here. Like, here, her ears are, like, sort of relaxed. They're out to the side. Then the shotgun blast goes off. Woof. And as the smoke clears, oh, the ears are all the way laid back, which is like basically they're using the same behavior of a cat or a horse, having the ears laid back as a visual signifier of fright or tension. And here, again, all of this smoke, all of these sparks, all of the stuff that billows out of Corky's terrible little helicopter thing, all hand animated on 2s. And then there's this thing. Corky's out here looking for bogeys and he's not seeing anything. I can't 100% tell if this is the same thing from the previous Tales of Runeterra short, where it's Jinx who has strapped like a rocket to the thing and it's flying through the sky, or whether it's just supposed to be Jinx full stop. I think it's a reference to the previous one, but I can't be 100% sure. Anyway, again, look at Corky's character animation. Look at the way that he emotes as a character, because now not only is Corky a little tiny character with very small and stubby arms, now you can't even see most of his body because it's being obscured by the helicopter thing that he's sitting in. So now his actions, his behaviors, his gestures are very big, very broad, and you can see like as he turns to look from one side to the other, the whole thing tilts with him just to accentuate that gesture and accentuate that movement, which also gives you the sense that like the flying machine is an extension of his body, like that it responds to his mood and his movements in a way that probably a flying machine shouldn't, unless you want it to fall out of the sky. And you can really see it again, like in his character movements, like very big emotions, very big movements, very big, like, behaviors in order to really sell the feelings of what he's saying. And I do like Pix here, who's just sitting there, like, kind of scratching the rock for whatever reason, because Pix is tiny and terrifying and wants to hurt things, I guess. I love the lighting work. Like, as the portal flares up and goes off. Because, this is something we should talk about. The backgrounds in this whole thing, like, most of the backgrounds, these are paintings. Like, these are 2D drawings that are layered. Like, we have this brush of flowers or whatever out in front, and they're layered on top of each other, sort of into the image. But they're all 2D paintings, which allows for a lot more. I think it's probably a budget thing. Like, rather than constructing these giant environments in 3D, we're just gonna 2D paint them and put them in the background. And because the characters themselves have an aesthetic that's really painterly, that's really sort of cartoony, we don't really notice it. Like, they feel like they fit in the environment, but I believe that's how those things are made. This just looks like a drawing, right? Like, this just looks like a painting. And that's just down to the brilliant texture work that they're doing on these character models. Like, the textures on these characters are so damn good that, like, they really do feel like living paintings or living cartoons. This is something that Riot has been pushing with a lot of their properties for a while now, that they really want characters in a lot of the things they make, especially the animated shorts, to look absolutely not realistic whatsoever, and not even really sort of Pixar-ish. They don't want them to look like that. They want them to look like essentially living drawings. We saw that very, very strongly in the launch cinematic for Legends of Runeterra, the one with Darius and like the Piltover kits, where it was basically animated like a living painting, which is something that they also used on the Annie short that they did a while back. Now, obviously, this animation was not created by Riot themselves. They outsourced that kind of thing to various animation houses, and this probably... who would it have been on this one? Future me, could you please find out who was the animation studio on this thing and then put their name in text? Thank you. They outsource these to animation studios outside of Riot, but they have like a unifying aesthetic that they push onto them. Like, there's clearly a lot of art direction that goes on to make sure that these things have a consistent, unified look. Again, hand animated, little sparks of some kind of anti-Yordle material. And again, here I'm just gonna call out the lighting, like that bright shining edge light around the edge of Tristana's model here, really outlining and highlighting the shape of her face and the shape of her lips and the shape of like this the roundness of her in a way that works really well. If they hadn't had that edge lighting around here, I think her character model would probably have looked a lot flatter. And then Corky comes to the rescue with a bit of an anime effect. Boom. Again, I believe this is probably hand animated, but we get this flash frame like something does in an anime when it's coming in for a rescue. As Corky bursts into view and immediately crashes. Poof. But we get one of the best shots in the whole thing out of it. It's gonna happen in just a second. It's It's so good. It's such a good little comedy shot. Like, it's so perfect. It's just such perfect timing where it's like, boom. He's doing this elaborate, like, sonic spinball thing and flying out in a Superman pose, and then it's just like, whoop, straight into the cage, old man. Vonk. And they accentuate it too, by the way. Like, as he bursts out of the smoke cloud, hand animated on twos, by the way. As he bursts out of the smoke cloud, and he comes here, like, to the, there's this moment of, like, essentially we're doing a little bit of slow motion, where we see him flying. You can see how, like, pay attention to the background. See how it slows down a little bit right here, right before we get to Graves, who's just standing there with the cage door open, and then zhoosh. Then all of a sudden we get this woof, like this little burst of speed as he just kind of pops into the cage. And that's part of the comedic timing here, is that you get this, like, he crashes down, and then you get this la la poosh. That timing, right? Like, it's that thing of, like, he bursts in, and then there's this little moment of slow motion as he looked heroic, and then there's, like, the pop when we undercut all the seriousness of his rescue attempt. It's so good. I love it. And then we cut to inside the cage, where Tristana is like, oh my god, why? And Corky is just sitting there dusting himself off. And Tristana is like, again, look at the exaggerated motions she has to do in order to really sell her body language. Like, she has to take a step forward with a foot, like knee down, bending her knees, and then spread her arms out completely wide to really sell this. Like, it's not like she's doing a, why did you do that? She's just doing a, why did you do that? Like, it's not an over-expressive bit of acting, but again, with the body language. Anyway, Corky pulls himself up a little bit, and he does something wonderful. That's a good gesture. Look at that little gesture where, like, I'm just a distraction. That's just that little finger waggle, and then pulling it back into that little dainty hand there. That's lovely. As we get absolutely the best moment of the short, like just the best narrative moment of the short, which is Graves, like, bright flash of yellow, huh? And then we're mirroring a little bit. If we go back to Tristana getting caught here, right? That moment of, like, seeing the thing and realizing, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. That's being mirrored here as Graves turns around and goes, oh, what's that? And then he goes, oh boy, that's not good. It's that same moment of shock happening again, but to Graves instead, as Twisted Fate is like, well, I'ma head out. I love the married energy coming off of these two in this short as well. It's like Twisted Fate is like, this is gonna go wrong for you. It's gonna go wrong. You don't know nothing. That's not gonna go wrong for me. I got this whole thing locked up. If you say so. There's such like it's just an old married couple energy coming off them. I love it. And like I said, best moment in terms of the narrative, because we're using Lulu's canonical ability, which is make herself extremely giant. It's just... It's so good. Like, again, here, all the stuff we talked about with, like, the proportions of the characters and the weirdness of the proportionality that they have, all of that comes into play now, because now all of a sudden Lulu is like the size of a small house. Boom, boom, smacks Graves aside like he's not even anything, because she only cares about, like, my sister lied to me and I'm upset about that. They're not sisters, by the way. Tristana and Lulu are not canonically sisters, but they have a sisterly relationship. It's just, like, narratively, it's so good that, like, Lulu, the silliest one, the one that Tristana is, like, most concerned about keeping out of danger, also shows up as essentially the most powerful of the group by far, because he likes, just like Graves, who's managed to capture 3 of them already, she just kind of doesn't even care about him. She's the person who ends up solving the problem, and I just narratively love that, and it's just such a good moment. Anyway, the weirdness of that proportionality comes into play now, because now, rather than being the size of a child, where we recognize that, okay, big head, small body, that's child proportions, we can kind of roll with that. Now, all of a sudden, she's giant, and, like, there's this uncanny feeling of this giant Lulu walking through a scene with, like, an ordinary-sized human in there. That just, it's like, the weirdness of it, like the strangeness of it, it works so well. And Lulu, the expressiveness on this character, like as she stomps forward, Like, you can see that angry pout. Like, he's like, I'm guarding this rock and I'm tired of it. Like, ah, look at that. Like, that's so good. There's so much character to it. Like, there's so much expressiveness to it. The way she's... And again, notice how the artist is moving the head around, using the physicality of the head to sell the expression. Like, twisting the head one way, like, pointing the jaw forward when she's, like, really angry, and then... Bzz. Again, I love the timing on this. So, again, hand-animated magic effects, because of course. But also, this. You see that? Like, right before she transforms, there's this moment of, like, visual implosion, basically, where, like, she... And again, coyote time. Where, like, she has transformed, she's no longer standing on the ground, but gravity doesn't affect her just yet. She's just gonna hover in the air for a second, just for the comedic beat. And then she falls down. And Graves, like, raising up the gun. Bonk! Doing a complete Tom and Jerry, like... And then this lovely flash frame, like, as the gun goes off. I really like that they painted Graves into it. Like, they didn't really need to do that. But you can see they painted Graves' face into the flash frame of the gun. Which is lovely. And so, look at Teemo throwing the gun here. It's a pretty simple thing, right? But again, tiny Yordles, everything needs to be exaggerated, so he rears back, swings the gun upwards, and then he leaps into the air. You can see how we're doing some squash and stretch on the leg, where the foot is kind of staying on the ground a little longer than it should. In order to do this throw for him. Like, again, a human character probably wouldn't have to jump to throw a gun, but because he's tiny, because the gun is huge and he has only a limited amount of body mass, we need a really exaggerated motion from him to justify imparting that much kinetic energy to the gun. So we get this voing, and as he comes back down, again, notice how the lower body kind of starts falling before the upper body. You can see how his legs begin to move downwards, like from here. His legs begin to move downwards while his upper body just basically stays in place. We get this a little bit more squash and stretch as he lands back down, throwing the gun to Trist. I really like this frame. It's just a good frame. Like, it's just, I like her expression. Like, she's not really angry or like I want to kill this guy. It's more about, haha, payback time. Like, it's not really sort of deadly violence that she's looking to inflict. She's just kind of looking to get her own back, so she gets this big smile as I'm about to shoot a gun. Ba-boom! And then as the gun goes off, like, the recoil, you can see her entire body getting knocked back. And she's, like, going back on one leg to manage her center of gravity as she comes back down in order to hold just the energy of the weapon she's just fired. And I kind of wish she'd shot Graves. Like, I kind of wish she had buster shot at him and, like, sent him flying in a more cartoony way rather than just shooting away his gun. But it does set us up for what Graves is going to do next. And again, look at Graves' behavior relative to the way the Yordles behave. This is a very grounded bit of animation. He just kind of gets one leg up, kind of hops forward. Whoop. And then jumps over. Like, very downbeat, not realistic as such, but much more grounded than anything the Yordles do. Again, it's like Corky putting him up for fisticuffs, sir! And then Lulu saves the day. Again, not by doing just running in and bonking him with her stick, but by running in, going down into a crouch, and then jumping into the air, doing a big spin that's accentuated by the magic effects coming off of her staff. Hovering in the air for a good long while there, like just coyote time all over the place here. And then bzoop. Like, just complete cartoon physics. And then hand animated on ones, these effects, by the way. As she casts the spell, like the legs out, like just this is complete Tom and Jerry. There's there's an old style manual that goes around sometimes on artist Twitter from the Tom and Jerry cartoon show, specifically showing the ways that the animators approached animating characters like Tom and Jerry to really make their movements pop and look good. And this is completely that. Like, the way that they use, like, movement lines. Because look at her body here. Like, look at how her body literally describes a curve like this, right? Like a really sort of taut curve, almost like a bow, that is being pulled back, and then we get the snap as it goes off. And then we come down for the landing. And as she comes down for the landing, again, I don't think there's a lot of squash and stretch going on. I don't think they need to stretch her very much. But as she comes down, she does this little, again, just the physicality of these characters is being used so well, because she lands on one leg, and there's this little ta-da pose, which I just think is so... It's so cute. Like, you again, without knowing anything about these characters, if you saw this screenshot for the first time without knowing anything else, you would know something about their personalities just from the way that they're posed right now, right? Like, you'd know that Lulu is a little bit more of the sort of performative, happy-go-lucky, silly person. You'd know Tristana is more of the frustrated straight man. You'd know that Corky is a little bit of a loose end. And apparently now also we know the origin story of the Gromp. Not necessarily that this is the Gromp, but presumably that the Gromp was transformed by a Yordle at some point in time into what it would eventually become. Who knows? It's probably not canon as such, but I'm gonna choose to believe that it is. That's one of Lulu's victims hanging out on Summoner's Rift. Suffering for eternity for pissing off a Yordle. So, as the frog jumps out of the screen, Lulu jumps in. And you get this lovely little, like, again, Lulu can't just run. She's not gonna run up to Tristana. She's gonna whee, boing. And again, bit of coyote time as she's just kind of hanging out in the air. Boing. And then twirl. And stand on one leg again. Because that's what Lulu's personality is like. That's her body language. That's how you express her as a character. Which is just so well done, and it's really well observed. It makes Lulu, like... Lulu is annoying in-game. In-game, she's just more like, yep, that tasted purple! Like, she's just kind of a silly, quirky, silly for the sake of silly kind of character. Here, animated like this, like, moving like this with this kind of expressiveness to her. And here you can really see the squash and stretch. Zoink. You can literally see how her body compresses back like a spring. Animated like this, she becomes much more sympathetic and much more fun and much, much, much more adorable. Just because the animation is doing so much work when it comes to selling who this character's personality is. Selling what their relationship to other characters is. Like little sister looking for big sister's approval. And it's such a good dynamic between the two of them. As poor Graves goes off to wait for the enchantment to wear off. With his frustrated husband, Twisted Fate, taking on the duties of dealing with him. And again, you can see the character in just the way that they're posing. Corky, hands, like he's crossing his arms, kinda, except he can't because his arms are tiny and stubby. He's crossing his arms, he's raising up his jaw, he's raising up his chin, he's raising up his head, and he has this, oh yes, I had the situation entirely under control, I am Corky, I'm a great warrior. And then Tristana, who's more like, yeah, see you around. Like, she's a little bit more cool and badass. And then Lulu is like the happy little child waving goodbye to grandma after a fun day. Whee! And I do like Teemo's little run animation here as well. And then he shows them what it was that he was doing. And they've done a little bit of a retcon with Teemo here, I think. Teemo used to be that he was actually kind of a dangerous sociopath. Like, he was someone who was actually kind of really freaking scary and incredibly good at killing. That was kind of his characterization. That was the joke with him, is that he's tiny, he looks adorable, but he will actually kill you with poison arrows if you mess with his home. They have changed him a little bit here, and I think that's the direction that they're going with him moving forward, where he's more of like a scout. Like, he's more of a Bandle City scout character in the sense of being like a Boy Scout. Someone who goes out on adventures to get merit badges for stuff, basically. Because that's what he was doing in Bilgewater, is he was looking for a merit badge for finding a pet of some kind or something along those lines. It's so good. Like, just the contrast in posing here. Like, look how Lulu is sort of this curved line like this, right? Like, she's inquisitive and curious and wondering what's going on, so her head is cocked, and like the hat is accentuating it, and she has this sort of curve to her to her movement. Tristana is much more of like a contrapost, like she has much more of a contrapose. With rather than describing a curve, you have this S curve that goes through her posture here. It's so good. It's such a good. It's a good way to pose characters relative to each other in a way that accentuates their mood and their feeling. And again, look how much they're using the head to animate Tristana as she talks here. Like, what were you doing, Teemo? Like turning the head, rotating the head, moving the head around, like twisting it from an angle that's like this, that's like tilted to the left, to an angle that's tilted to the right. They use the physicality of these Yordle characters so well as Teemo reveals the thing that he has found. We're not really shown what it is, but it's probably, like, given that his journal had like drawings of like the ruined king in them, and given the blue light that comes out of this thing, I'm sort of given to think that maybe the thing that he went and found was an undead monstrosity from the Shadow Isles, which would be just absolutely hilarious. And I do love, again, the change in posture. See, here everyone's leaning forward, looking at what Teemo has brought them. Like, everyone's curious, everyone's interested, and then everyone gets blasted back by the terrifying monstrosity that he has inside his bag, whatever the hell they are. And Corky, like, literally runs for cover behind Lulu. But here's the really good thing. The lovely little bit of character animation is that here, after this, Tristana is here, right? Like, she's like, oh, she's recoiling from this thing, and she's, like, worried about what it is. Look at what Lulu does. She leans forward again and opens her eyes wider and looks closer because she's curious and she thinks it's fun. While Tristana is a little bit more like, oh boy, that's gonna get us all in trouble. This is such a lovely short. I love it. It's just adorable. It's such good character animation. There's some lovely squash and stretch going on. The use of lighting is absolutely beautiful. The environments are great. And there's a lovely little closing gag as we get our first real close look at Pix, I think we've ever gotten, which it turns out that he's actually a fuzzy little creature. And looks a lot like a miniature Yordle himself, actually. It's lovely. The Yordles are good. Like, they're one of the only really original things that League of Legends has. Everything else is kind of stuff we've seen before elsewhere, but the Yordles are actually kind of unique to the game. Like, yes, there's inspiration from, like, furries and chibis and stuff like that, but they are, like, the one really, really original thing that League of Legends has. And I'm so glad that we finally got an animated short that was completely dedicated to them. Because they're fun, they're good, and they're just nice and happy, and looking at them makes me glad that I spent time looking at them. Hopefully, you will also have enjoyed looking at the Yordles with me, and me blabbering on about some of the stuff I noticed with the ways that they're animated, and the ways that this thing is staged. Tomorrow, we're gonna look at that Ruined King animation, which, boy howdy, that is sure gonna be a lot. This thing is already over an hour. I can't imagine how long it's gonna take me to do that thing. But if you want to see it, then you should hit the like, comment, and or subscribe buttons down below in whatever order and combination you feel like, because those are the buttons that will let you know when I upload new videos with stuff in it that you may wish to look at and have go into your eyeballs. If you want to support the channel more directly than that, then I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar, so, you know, plenty of monetization options available if you want to. If you don't want to, or if you're not in a position to be able to, which is, like, pretty freaking common these days, don't worry about it. It's completely okay. I do want to encourage people who watch this video, generally speaking, to support content online that they enjoy directly, with direct contributions of whatever you can, whenever you can. Because whether it's me or someone else, it doesn't really matter so much, but for online content creators, a $1 donation can be literally the same as thousands of views on a video. Like, it's the same as thousands of people watching your thing in terms of the returns when it comes to advertising algorithms and stuff. So if there's content that you enjoy, especially if it's niche or if it's from a smaller creator, please consider supporting it directly with anything you can, whenever you can, because you make such a huge difference, much more than you think. Anyway, Last bit of self-promotion I have to do is that I have a second channel. I do Let's Plays over there. We're playing through Breath of the Wild currently, an episode a week where I do like a long, slow playthrough where I'm not really hurrying. I'm just kind of enjoying the world and doing it. Some people have called it an ASMR playthrough. I don't know if that's true, but that's certainly the vibe I've been going for. Also playing some Hades. That's the game. That's the name of the game that I've been playing for like 150 hours at this point. Playing a lot of that over there, as well as other stuff also. So if you want to like, comment, subscribe over there as well, I'd be very grateful for it. Is that it? Yes, that is all my self-promotion. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to wear a mask and wash...